Next on Rugby Wrap-Up, Alexander the Great Corbisiero, Stephen the Lizard Lewis, and Matt McCarthy on the Autumn Internationals. Rugby Wrap-Up brought to you in part by The Pig and Whistle, the world's best rugby pub. The Murphy Kennedy Group, founded with the idea that construction can be done better. And Lean and Limber, stretching your way to a healthier lifestyle. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Rugby Wrap-Up. Thank you for joining us once again. We have a pretty good show for you today. We have Mr. Stephen Lewis, once again calling in from the Upper West Side. You can see he is wearing his Rugby United New York jumper, hoodie, sweatshirt. He is, of course, the general manager of Rugby United New York. He's also the Jamaica Sevens rugby program coach, director of rugby, whatever you want to call it, for the men's and women. And he is the two-time reigning USA Rugby Coach of the Year. Thank you to the pandemic. And, of course, we have Mr. Alexander the Great Corbisiero, NBC analyst after a stellar rugby career with England and in the Premiership. Alex, I want to welcome you back first off because I think you might have a little bit of news for people.
What's going on? Thanks for having me. Didn't mention the Giltini scrum coach on my resume, but I'll let you get by. We already broke that news, so I had very exciting news. I got my latest scan results and blood work done, and as of now, I am what's certified as sort of cured or cancer-free, and we just got to monitor. But where the cancer has spread has been deemed to have shrunk into normal ranges. So best case scenario, we got through the chemo and got good news now, and just my immune system's getting back to normal ranges as well. So we're on the road to recovery, and really happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to share that.
Wow, that is great news. And we were talking off camera a little bit. I was worried. I've got this two things about being Irish. You have this impending guilt all the time, and then you also worry. And Stephen, you've been a busy little bee, right? Buzzing around the tri-state area with Rooney, giving clinics and stuff.
Yeah, just, it's been a tough time, just trying to keep the game alive. So made ourselves available to any high school program or anybody really, just to anyone who wants to throw a ball around. So, went down to Old Blue, had a touch contest against White Plains last week. And there's actually a Met New York Collegiate Select playing at 1:00 this Saturday again at Pelham against White Plains. So any rugby right now is a good thing. We're just trying to keep the thing ticking over.
Interesting. All right. You mentioned White Plains, and there was a gentleman named Pat Quinn. For those of you that didn't know this, and I want to talk about this real quickly, we lost Pat Quinn, and we also lost Christophe Dominici, the French star, this week. Pat, of course, was the co-founder of the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. He was diagnosed with ALS when he was 30, and he was 37 when he passed away this week, but he put some fight in, and he brought this thing a great deal of attention. And of course, Christophe, who epitomized French flair, French rugby flair, passed away this week. And our thoughts go out to the families, of course.
Yeah, obviously, can't agree more with you there. And Pat Quinn obviously was very much a fixture at Iona College. Good friend of Bruce McLean's and well known in these parts.
Yeah, just a courageous guy. And Alex, did you ever meet Christophe?
I have met him briefly. I didn't get to play against him, but I have met him a long time ago in Paris at an England-France game. And he's just an absolute legend. And it's so sad to see his passing. And, my thoughts go out to his family. And what an incredible player. And it's just sad to, that he's left us way too soon.
Yeah, the tributes are flowing in. You've got Johnny Wilkinson, Dan Carter, just about everybody in the rugby community. A tough loss. But again, our thoughts go out to those families. And also, USA Rugby legend, three-time World Cup stud Lou Stanfill announced that he is battling Hodgkin's lymphoma, and no doubt that he'll beat that. But he got a very cool video pep talk from the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger. How cool is that?
Hey, Lou, I just found out that you have cancer. Don't get discouraged. Remember, positive attitude is the most important thing.
It's so cool. I saw that on Instagram. I was buzzing for him, and him joking that he's already in remission. after getting a pep talk from Arnold. And, thoughts to Lou. I can sympathize a lot with his position, and he's obviously going to have a hard road to travel, but he's a strong guy physically and mentally. He'll put him in great stead. He's got a family to fight for as well. And just wishing him well and hear from him any way that he needs. And it's been amazing to see how the rugby community, like I felt a lot of support and love for them, have put their arms around him and supported him and his cause. And I would advise people to check it out if you hasn't, and have a look at the link where you can help him and his family out as well. So a big shout out to Lou.
Yeah, that's you beat me to it. The link is on the screen there, folks. Please click it or check it out. And, I got to say this, if cancer couldn't have two tougher foes than you and Lou Stanfill, right? I mean, that's
hell of a tag team, We main event WrestleMania and took the hell out of cancer at WrestleMania. No, but I'm honestly, it's a tough road, but the mental side as well as the physical side is taxing. And I feel like, rugby puts you in a great stead to give you the sort of the mindset and the strength as well to get through these challenges.
All right, so now we can get to the autumn rugby. And we'd be remiss, again, if we didn't mention the women's game, specifically that dramatic finish and victory for England versus France. And, Steve, you've got a long tenure coaching women's rugby, West Point, Jamaica Sevens, here in the States, all kinds of setups, 15s, 7s. George Hook, who is supposed to be on this show right now, but is probably struggling with technology, was coach of the Irish women's national team. And Alex, you are not only married to a USA Rugby superstar, but you were at the match. So maybe you can walk us through it.
It was a great test match. Back-to-back games, obviously. England had beaten France in Grenoble the week before. This one was at Twickenham. And, France absolutely brought it to England. I thought the intensity, the rugby they played, the ability to move the ball out wide and stress England on the edges, keep it alive with offloads. If anything, they just missed some more of their opportunities. It looked like they built enough score to win the game and get their first victory against England since 2018, first victory on English soil since 2015. But right at the depth of the game, I think with the 60-odd minutes, Simon Middleton unloaded 8 of his bench, his whole bench at once. A lot of experience on that bench, players like Emily Scarrett, Marley Packer. They came on and they sort of shored the game for England, and they won it with a kick at the last minute from Scarrett to win the game. And it was heartbreak for France, but it was really promising to see these two teams really have such a competitive game, especially as they were drawn in the same pool for the World Cup later this year in New Zealand.
Steve, does your mantra of ABE, anybody but England, apply to the women's matches, specifically when it's France versus England?
Absolutely. Always the same. And just as this point of history in women's rugby, actually, there was another significant milestone this week, which was the first women's referee in a senior South African game. I think Amy Barrett-Terron is her name. She did the Bulls Pumas, I think, so like Joy Neville. So we're starting to see these milestones on an increasingly regular basis, and that's a great thing.
Yes, indeed. All right, now we can go to the men. And why not start with Fiji losing to Italy 28-0. And that's the second time in 2 weeks Fiji has lost 28-0 to a team. And why is that? Because they forfeited because of the COVID-19, because they had 29 players test positive. And in this competition, the official scoring is 4 converted tries. That's 28-0 for the folks at home that don't know this. So that's Fiji, unfortunately, not being able to play in this tournament so far. Wales, 18. Georgia, 0. Stephen, the Welsh looking to break what seemed to be a 20-match losing streak. It was actually 6. And they did indeed get off the schneid for Wayne Pivac. But it was, as Barron's of all publications said, was a dour win. And since you're the closest thing that we have to a Welshman on the show today, why don't you step up and talk about this match?
You're right. They snapped a losing streak in particularly unconvincing fashion, as you suggested. What's probably more important is what is up next for them, which is a dominant England coming in their direction this weekend. Something that might play in their favour, though, is they're actually playing at Parc y Scarlets at Llanelli, which is a club ground, smaller ground, open, so no roof, no nothing. So if weather's bad, that could be something positive for Wales. But right now, it's very hard to see them. I don't think they've built enough confidence to stop this English juggernaut, which is what we're seeing right now.
Alex, in the world of hypotheticals, you're now the head coach of Wales. What are your 3 immediate moves ahead of this match against England next week and going forward?
I think a big area that Wales need to improve on is the physicality. I think they've gone away from that a little bit under Gatland, that, they used to pride themselves on that. And I think, that front 5 has got to offer a bit more around the park for me. I think they need more dominant carries and they need more bigger hits. If you look at the output that England are producing in that area, it's kind of like a gold standard. So I think, there's a lot of work rate in that, but I think some of the more dominant collisions need to come up from that front 5. Similar, I think they need one out-and-out ball carrier in that back row. I think, they've got the sort of breakdown sort of threats in and around, but I do think they're a little lacking of go forward. I don't know if Moriarty's fit or not, but someone with just sort of a route 1 direct physical, presence on the field, I think is needed. And then with that, if you can get getting some consistent quick ball, I think playing Sheedy at 10 and trying to play sort of having more of an attacking identity. I don't really know exactly how Wales want to attack. I think if you play bigger to playing Sheedy, you have a lot of difference in the style of play. So for me, it would be trying to get on the front foot and Pivac going back to what he did well at the Scarlets, playing flat to the line, playing quick ball and actually, upping the tempo in the attack. I think the error count's been too high. I think they've been a bit predictable. And the other thing is their set piece hasn't been consistent enough against the good teams to allow them a proper platform to play. I think the biggest contrast is the 2 halves against Ireland and Wales. In the first half, lost the collision, set piece malfunctioned, blown away. Second half, actually started the front up, got on the front foot, played a bit more rugby, weren't accurate enough to get the win, but actually showed more of what they can do. So that second half performance against Ireland is what I'd be looking to try and replicate and the areas that I just touched on.
Interesting, another little subtext to this game, England-Wales, is that England coming, as usual, mind games, except this time it isn't Eddie Jones. John Mitchell's in the press today.
Yes.
Ex-Eagles and All Blacks coach, good friend of ours, stirring the pot a little bit, saying that perhaps Wales might target a couple of individual players, and a little bit naughty, but that's what gets players fired up. It's what sells newspapers. The game needs a bit of colour. It needs a bit of controversy. I'm all for it.
Oh, controversy. Instead of controversy for the American audience. I like that. Keep it real, Steve. All right, guys, we got to take a quick break, but we'll come back and we'll talk about Scotland versus France, Ireland versus England, and Argentina versus Australia, and our previews for next week after this.
Been blind since I was 4, and I've never seen a beer commercial or a beer label. None of that stuff influences me. I drink beer because of the taste, and my beer is Pabst Blue Ribbon. It has the taste and the flavor.
What do you think's on the label?
I think there's a naked woman riding on a unicorn, jumping over fire. Oh, that's good beer.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub, the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street. And we are back. Scotland are the New York Mets of international test rugby. Every single time they're on the cusp of a franchise-changing win, they come up with an epic, unbelievable gaffe that just leaves everybody going home and curling up. Stuart Hogg not finding touch. What? Come on, man.
Well, you're being somewhat hyperbolic as usual and exaggerating. First of all, it's not a World Cup final. It's a friendly in the autumn. Secondly, it was a pretty evenly contested game. Scotland had not one, not two, but 3 chances in the last 5 minutes. But their line-out failed to execute on 2 occasions. And then, as you mentioned, Stuart Hogg was a little... I'd much rather have a player like that who shows up, who fronts up, and who goes for the distance. That was a long kick. To get 20 yards away from the line wouldn't have helped him. He had to thread the needle. He's done it many times. On this occasion, he didn't. But one mistake, You know, like one swallow does not make a summer. One mistake does not make this guy a bad player. So keep it in perspective.
It's a tough one because obviously there's going to be frustration, especially from a forward's point of view. Like the hard work's been done, get down there, and you're thinking next job, the platform to try and give them to win the game. But at the same time, if it's Stuart Hogg. I take him on the field for Scotland every day of the week. For me, he's the Lions fullback. He's a fantastic player, and obviously a huge error. And you could compare it maybe to him dropping that ball over the line. I believe it earlier in the Six Nations. Like, he's not perfect, but it's not an intentional error. He has an absolute cannon on that left foot usually as well, and he was trying to get in the distance to win the game. But I think knowing Hoggy as well and playing with him, he'll beat himself up over that more than I think anyone else will, and he'll look to try and improve that going forward, and he'll be the first one to take it on the chin for the boys. But it's a tough pill to swallow because it was really the shot to get back into the game for them, and they blew it. But on a whole, they're playing a very good French team as well.
Stephen, your hypocrisy, like Doc Holliday's in Tombstone, knows no bounds. You were all over kickers professionally for not making even the most difficult of conversion kicks. And here you are giving this guy a pass on this one. I'm apoplectic.
I'm giving you a pass on your choice of tie. So.
Oh, really? Because Alex, the last two shows, I wore my Team Corbs shirt and got vilified by Stadler and Waldorf in the form of Lewis and Hook telling me that I wasn't dressed well enough.
It wasn't a team.
I have my Golden Eagles tie on, saluting Lou Stanfill today, and I was waiting for you to say something.
It wasn't a Team Corbs shirt. It was the dodgy jacket. That to me is red, white, and blue, which that to me is also Glasgow Rangers. So let's leave it there.
Oh, because everybody's thinking of them right now on this show. Wow, Alex, you see what we got to deal with while you're gone? I mean, it's Ireland at Twickenham, 18-7. And this one was a tough one to watch if you're an Ireland fan. Let me just go over the stats here real fast. The halftime stats, for instance. Ireland had the ball 57% of the time to England's 43% of the time. Ireland won 5 of 7 scrums. Meters gained saw Ireland with 392 on 66 carries. That's 392 meters on 66 carries to England's 34 carries for 220 meters. And tackles subsequently, England had 119 in the first half to Ireland's 39. Ireland, though, lost 3 of their lineouts and were awful on the other ones, and they paid dearly for that. And despite these stats, England was on top 12-zip going into the shed at halftime. So it was mind-numbing. And then after 80 minutes, 246 tackles by England. 246. That's like a Team USA playing against the All Blacks at Soldier Field. It's like a Tier 1 nation versus a Tier 2 nation, as the broadcasters pointed out. And you got Mako Vunipola with 16 tackles, and he had the least amount of the front 8. And yet, Ireland comes away without a win. Alex?
I don't think I think England were absolutely fine in that game to let Ireland have the ball. And I think it was purely the physicality of England is still the X factor for them, which is the separation between them and Ireland. For me, I think Ireland can't handle England and win those front foot collisions. I think the set piece at the scrum, the maul, the line out, and especially in that first half, England disrupted Ireland, and that's really where they got the penalties that got them the in for their first try that came from that crossfield. But they bludgeoned them with the scrum penalty, then the maul and the power game, and when they had the advantage, Johnny May got the crossfield. I thought, Ireland started the game trying to play around England with a lot more of, kicks to contest. And I really think that was probably their best way into the game, was they were getting good reward in those, and it was giving them unstructured, defense, like transition attack to get to attack against, because once that England line got set, it was men v boys. England were getting off the line. It was actually a thing of beauty to be pitch side because there's no crowds, and hear the talk, the collisions, and just the intensity that England brought it was too much for Ireland. And in a game where you look at, I think England's biggest faux pas was their penalty count. It was outrageous, especially in that second half. It was almost like a defensive drill for the last 20, 30 minutes where they would defend 20-odd phases, not even really feel like they looked like they need to give a penalty away, but stupid indisciplined penalty. Then there'd be another line-out attack into their 22, and I think it was England's breakdown work, which I knew they were going to be good at the breakdown, but I thought with Doris, with Omani, with Stander, with some of the players they had, I thought it would be quite competitive at the breakdown. But England had so many. Yeah, England had so many key turnovers at key points of the game where you thought they might be under pressure, and they came up with a big turnover. And then just the clinicalness in that first half to score that Johnny May try off one line-out error, and it shows how they can punish you. It was kind of All Black-esque sometimes. Sometimes the All Blacks don't have the ball for a large part of the game, and then they get it and they score like that. And I thought England showed passes at a time, but I think against a better team, say like France or even Wales at times, they don't want to be giving those middle of the field penalties away as much to then give teams entries to their 22.
Yeah, well, first to go back to your original rant about the statistics, I think slightly misinterpreted. The key statistics was the England tackle count, right? And that was just a formidable defensive effort. They were more successful letting Ireland play with the ball. So consequently, you get players like Gibson Park, and you get later in the game, chasing the game, getting more desperate, not sticking to patterns, having to take chances, and those chances not working out. England was suffocating. That was a formidable defensive performance, but they are looking pretty damn good right now. And coming from me, that's a compliment. England are building up a head of steam, right? And the English press will always start that into a snowball. But it's all about timing. It's like they had that wonderful semi-final against New Zealand, didn't quite crack it. They're a good team now, but if your goal is World Cup wins, which is still 3 years away, then I'm not saying are they peaking too soon, or some of these guys going to have to be replaced.
Yes.
In the next 18 months, they look like they're going to be the dominant force.
Gentlemen, quick true or false question for you. If not for Jacob Stockdale's garbage time try, it would have been 2 consecutive shutouts for England. Have they had 2 consecutive shutouts since 1962? True or false? Alex?
True.
Stephen?
I'll go false. No clue.
Oh, again, Alex Corbisiero, the pros pro. Ding, ding, ding. He wins that one. All right.
Do I look English? Do I look English?
I just guessed this one, mate.
No, you didn't, Alex. You knew it. You knew the question. You know your stuff.
I felt like it did, but I wasn't sure. I was like, surely it's got to be true, that, but I didn't know.
Let's move on to the Southern Hemisphere. Los Pumas clawed their way back to a tie with the Wallabies, who blew a 9-point lead with under 20 minutes remaining in Australia, in Newcastle, I believe. And Sanchez and Hodge accounted for all the points. They each had 5 penalty goals, and they each missed 1. Wallabies had 2 tries disallowed, and they were correct. It was correct in disallowing them. For Australia, Dave Rennie was livid, whereas Mario Ledesma, who could be the best coach in this tournament, was relieved. I mean, he's got his team on the road. They were mentally gassed after beating New Zealand, and he lost his number 9 the day before, Tomas Kubeli, who's been playing well, to injury. Alex, if you are Wallabies captain Michael Hooper, what is your message to the team, specifically now that I think they're sitting out this weekend?
I think it's the frustrations of their missed opportunities in their error counts. I think it's a similar theme that haunted them in some of those All Black games where they left opportunities that they would create out there, extra passes, offloads, sometimes, trying to go for that wonder try. And I think Dave Rennie touched on it afterwards as well, that sometimes, there's nothing wrong with taking a ruck or a tackle and playing 1 or 2 more phases to score. And I think that's sort of the balance that team needs to strike. Is I think Argentina are throwing the kitchen sink at you in their defensive outputs, and there's a strong argument to be saying there's a theme with top teams feeling more comfortable not having the ball than having the ball because of the breakdown rules, and also then backing yourselves off the transition or turnover attack. But for me, I think it's the missed opportunities which will haunt them. I think the error count is too high for them. They're creating and playing some exciting stuff, but the composure and the last little touches to sort of small margins that you need at Test football aren't quite there yet for them, and that theme has been creeping in now for a number of weeks.
Back to the Australian point. I mean, he's bloody Rennie, right? Ex-Glasgow coach. And he didn't really like the header, set the header alight when he was at Glasgow. But he's a great coach. He's brought along introduced a lot of young players to this Australian team. So the cake isn't quite baked yet as far as Australia go. So I wouldn't get too concerned about where they end up. I think this is still a proving ground, this tournament for them. Argentina, emotional, abrasive. They've come out. They've fronted up. They play for that flag. They play for that jersey with no little skill. They've had a great tournament already.
My concern for Argentina is, as you mentioned, they play with emotion. I mean, after that emotion goes away, and how draining is playing with that kind of emotion, Alex, over the course of week in and week out. I know rugby is an emotional game, and you have to have that part in you, but you also have to check it. And it's a fine line, isn't it?
It's a fine line, but I think that Argentina team is fueled off passion, national pride, what they've been through to get to where they are. Will that get you a diminishing marginal returns is a big question. Can you keep emotionally revving yourself up to those levels every week and keep that consistent? History will show us probably not. So at some point, there's going to be an inevitable dip. But the fact that they have come, and we can credit, maybe they're not scoring a bunch of tries, whatever. They've come out playing no rugby since the World Cup, and they've gone out there and they beat the All Blacks and drawn with the Wallabies out of a cold start. I think that is
with
incredible.
Some of their players on the road for 4 months,
which is an incredible achievement. And so I'm hard to be hypercritical of them, because the fact that they've been able to do that is unreal, and it shows an example for someone like South Africa, who pulled out because of fears of not being prepared enough and not having and then you see a team that's gone through what they've gone through and gone out there and done that. As much as there's things I could critique about them, I want to just pat them on the back. And just to jump in on your first question about best 9 and 10, the only people I would argue are better is Dupont and Intermac at the moment for France. But other than that, I think they are clear contenders right up there. But I think those two for me are sort of in their own little league of their own at the moment.
That would be my choice. But we're including New Zealand in this mix, in this question, and England, and
No, I agree.
It's amazing, and they're young too, so that's a pretty cool thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing for rugby in the global game. Okay, guys, Stephen's got to go, so we got to bang through our predictions. Scotland, Fiji. I predict Scotland wins 28-0. Wales versus England. I think you guys would probably agree with me on that one. So Wales versus England. Stephen.
England, 32-12.
England, 22-10.
I'm going to go with England, 30-12. Same plotting, uncreative performance from Wales that we've seen so far. France versus Italy. Alex.
35-10 to France.
Stephen.
42-6 France.
Oh, I'm going to go with 35-6. General Giuseppe Garibaldi will be conflicted, as Adam Gilchrist is when the Gilgronis play the Giltinis, neither of which is an Italian crime family. Ireland versus Georgia. Stephen.
Ireland, 22-3.
Alex, you look like a Georgian prop, by the way, just for the record. What is your take on this? And you could have played for Ireland, so you have an enormous stake in this one.
Corbs will pick. I'm going to pick Ireland 30 points to 6.
I'm going to go with Ireland 28, Georgia 3. We still have that last one, the big one in the Southern Hemisphere, the rematch, All Blacks versus Argentina. Stephen.
All Blacks, 24-12.
Alex, has the romance worn off for Argentina? As the luster, is it now back to reality?
Yeah, 28-10 to the All Blacks. I think they come out with a vengeance.
I'm going with Argentina just to be the crazy Yank. Argentina 20, New Zealand 17. On that note, I want to thank my guests, Mr. Stephen Lewis, calling up from the bougie Upper West Side, and Mr. Alex Corbisiero, calling in from the beautiful Greenwich, Connecticut of England in Surrey. I'm Matt McCarthy for Rugby Wrap Up in Midtown Manhattan, signing off.